foreign investment going into China is now negative for the first time in 25 years. This is data coming straight from an arm of China's government, who prepare these quarterly financials to present a high-level overview of China's economy, things like exports and imports, reserved assets, and yes, foreign investments. So in this video, let's simplify all of this by understanding how important foreign investment is for China's economy today, what this means for China's economy in the future, and why China isn't concerned at all, but should they be? China just recorded its first ever quarterly deficit in foreign direct investment, which helps support the narrative that's been a part of every single headline and every YouTube video that Western countries and companies are de-risking their exposure to China. At the surface, this doesn't seem that great. China's economic growth over the last couple decades was built on foreign investment for things like manufacturing, which has turned China into the world's factory. And de-risk or no de-risk, the world still needs China, and they know it, which is why China shouldn't be concerned at all by this, a topic we're going to dive into later in the video. Okay, so you may be asking, how can you have a negative investment? Since the recording of this data in 1998, foreign investment into China has had a steady upward trajectory, again, which has been one of the main catalysts to their economic growth. But its recent drop from $100 billion to negative $11.8 billion over a short period of time is significant. The negative investment simply means that there is more foreign money flowing out of China than there is capital flowing into China. And this is happening because of many different factors. Of course, things like geopolitical tensions, but this motivation feels more economic. Like the old saying goes, don't put all your eggs into one basket, and the world had way too many of their eggs in the China basket. The COVID-19 pandemic created significant supply chain issues across the world and exposed some of the system's flaws. Looking specifically at the United States, a lot of their imports were coming from the other side of the world. So one of the concepts that has been growing recently is called nearshoring, where companies look to move some or even all of their supply chain closer to the consumer to avoid delays. And for the United States, this meant moving supply chain operations to Latin American countries like Mexico. Nearshoring is more of an economic move for the United States, who can take advantage of the US-Mexico-Canada Free Trade Agreement. But the next supply chain concept is more of a geopolitical move, and it's known as friendshoring. With the tensions between US and China, friendshoring is when you move operations to stronger political or economic ties in the region, countries like India, Thailand, or Vietnam. While this might sound good on the surface, there are still plenty of risks to de-risking supply chains from China. The first is the human emotion of retaliation. Within the last few months, the United States restricted sales of advanced chip-making equipment to China. These export controls will without a doubt have an impact on US chip manufacturers like Nvidia, AMD, and Intel, an important part of the tech sector that's helped bolster the US stock market. But the end game for the US government is to not let China pass them technologically, and Beijing is obviously not a fan of this, accusing the United States of abusing export controls to suppress Chinese companies. So China retaliated and decided to ban the use of Apple iPhones at central government agencies, and Apple's stock dropped because of the news. Now, obviously something this petty won't have a long-term impact on a top company like Apple, but it underscores the idea that China may not be someone you want to get in a tit-for-tat retaliation battle with. Another risk to de-risking in China has to do with visibility. What many people don't realize is there are many tiers when it comes to the manufacturing and supply chain process. For example, iPhones don't get 100% created in the same location. There are many tiered processes with multiple manufacturing locations having different tasks to complete production. But what happened prior to all this de-risking was most of the processes were probably in China, from the most basic to the most advanced. And now, as supply chain is moving away from China, it's likely that the more basic processes are being moved to lower manufacturing cost countries like India and Vietnam. But this makes it much harder for companies to keep track of all the moving parts, literally and figuratively. A survey was done in 2021 with companies that manufacture specifically smart appliances and asked if they understand their different tiered supply chains locations and the key risk those suppliers face. For context, Tier 3 supplies Tier 2 with what they need, and Tier 2 supplies Tier 1 with what they need. So all are equally important, but just under half of the respondents understood the challenges faced by Tier 1, and only 2% said they understood the challenges for their Tier 3 suppliers. So now having different tiered supply chains in different locations can make it much more challenging to keep up with, but for some, the risk of spreading out their eggs is worth it than keeping all their eggs in China. How can China possibly replace all of its lost foreign investment? Before we get into that, I make videos about world news impacting the dollar and the US economy. So if you like topics like this, and want to see more of them, make sure to subscribe to the channel. This is a serious topic and a significant blow to China, but as this story gets more traction on the internet and the West's favorite buzzword, de-risking, becomes even buzzier, there's one thing you need to know. China has been preparing for de-risking over the last 10 plus years. As soon as China's success in manufacturing comes up, many people automatically say,
oh, it's probably because of cheap labor.
However, wages in China have increased significantly over the last 2 decades, as you can see by this chart here. And this is another big reason why businesses are leaving China. Over the decades, as China has become the world's factory, they've leveled up the type of manufacturing that they've been able to do. This chart is a good example showing the wage differences over the last 15 years between China's and Mexico's manufacturing sector. Mexico has remained steady at about $2 per hour, while China has increased wages by over 6 times in the same span. And this adds up over time, but when talking about China's wages, there's a caveat, because while China's wages have gone up over the last couple decades, currently China is actually cutting wages, and many people seem to be impacted. According to Reuters, finance workers, doctors, and civil workers are getting pay cuts, new jobs have a lower starting salary than previously offered, and all of this could hurt one of China's weakest parts of their economy, domestic consumption. Besides Mexico, there's a lot of talk right now about India taking China's businesses, which is absolutely true on the surface. India is the hot country right now in terms of growth potential, as many experts believe they could become the largest economy in the world in some 50 years down the road. Now, I get it, 50 years is a long time from now, and of course a lot of things can happen, but it just shows how highly some think of their potential. But over the last few months, there have been tons of articles written and videos made on how India will supplant China and have already started taking business away from them, which they have, but not entirely, because India needs Chinese materials to manufacture. And right now, India's manufacturing is often restricted to lower end assembly. For example, Apple got a lot of headlines that they will be manufacturing iPhones in India. Again, not wrong, but it's just missing some context. Most operations for Apple in India are known as FATP, or Final Assembly, Test, and Pack, a labor-intensive process performed with components that are flown in directly from China, meaning the value added in India's manufacturing is actually very small. China will continue to dominate the future of manufacturing because of the incredible ecosystem that they've already built. China doesn't just manufacture products at a cheaper price point, but they control the entire supply chain process. In 2023, China surpassed Japan as the world's largest car exporter and dominates many industries that will be vital to the future of the world, like electric vehicles, solar panels, renewable energy, and artificial intelligence. Let's look at how dominant they are in a couple of these industries. For solar power, China has over 3 times more than the second place country, the United States. And when it comes to industrial robot installations, China is once again destroying the competition. It once again shows their substantial manufacturing advantage because of their willingness to invest in the best technology. So while this news and these financials seem like we should be sounding the alarm bells, it's important to remember to dig a little deeper and add the necessary context. Speaking of digging deeper, this video only scratched the surface when it comes to China's manufacturing. To find out the real reason why countries and companies are leaving China for alternative options, make sure to check out this video here.